I think the issue really has been repeatedly stated by the Bosnian government, that we say we don't want other armies, we don't want even other people to bomb for us, but they feel very, very unfairly treated under the so-called arms embargo, because it's well known that the Serbs have all the power and all the resources of the Serbs and the former Yugoslav army. Muslims have nothing. They were comparing 15 tanks with 700 tanks that the Serbs had. So I think what they feel is that there have been a great deal of double standards, if not sheer hypocrisy on the part of some countries, as well as the United Nations, in fact, by saying, no, we don't want to add fuel to the fire, while letting Muslims being slaughtered for 13 months. Even if they just lifted the arms embargo, they would have been able to defend themselves. So I think the issue is not just going on and bombing or killing someone else, enabling people to defend themselves and to take out those equipment that's killing civilians every day.
One of the things that is a real proof to the failure of the American foreign policy in particular is the hypocritical stand that when the United Nations was, representatives were blocked in Iraq from doing what? Inspecting weapon sites, which could be done today, could be done tomorrow. Iraq was bombed, and bombed severely, okay, until it got on its knees. When the same United Nations people were prevented by military force from providing what? Humanitarian and medical aid to injured, to children, to women, the United States sat down and looked and said, maybe we need to have tougher sanctions, as if they had believed that sanctions worked on Iraq. And they have said all along, sanctions alone are not going to do it, and this is why they bombed Iraq. This is why they sent 500,000 men and women to fight. So this hypocritical thing cannot be understood in congruency with neither Christianity, nor Islam, nor American foreign policy, except in a hypocritical context. And this brings a lot of pain to many Muslims, because you look at the situation there, and we are talking about minorities, and we cannot ignore this slaughtered minority there in the heart of Europe, where the NATO alliance do not lack the weapons. They are not waiting for the United States to send people. They should be moving. And correctly stated by Joe Biden after his visit to Bosnia, and when the Secretary of State was testifying in the Senate, Biden said, had this we know, and the European community know for a surety, that if Muslims were doing what the Serbs are doing today, that could have been a completely different story. And it calls upon the integrity of the United States. It called it into question, from the popular standpoint to the administrative political standpoint. People are not rising up in arms in America because of justice. And I believe that the media has a responsibility too. But I believe also that the Christian, Muslim, Judaic, ecumenical community in America did not take a solid stand to make their loud voice penetrate through the White House and the Senate and the Congress to make sure that justice is done. At least similar treatment, the minimum.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to go back to what I thought was a kind of underlying question beyond Bosnia, and I agree with the comments that have been made in terms of double standards. I think not only in the case of Bosnia, but also in the case of Palestine, in the case of Lebanon, in the case of Cyprus. There have been a whole series of UN resolutions that have been enforced, or that have not been enforced, and then suddenly we have a series that were meticulously enforced, even beyond being enforced. In the case of Iraq, where the no-fly zone, which was never sanctified by a UN resolution, nevertheless supposedly justified a U.S. bombing raid. So I think that the accusation of a double standard sticks, and it's an issue that we ought to be facing together if we believe in the United Nations, and all these years we said we did. But I think on the underlying question, which is, do Muslims have things to fear when they are a minority in non-Muslim societies, which I heard that question being asked, is I think they do. I think that there are all kinds of violence that can be perpetrated, that they may start off as a kind of intellectual violence or as a kind of verbal violence, but nevertheless can lay the groundwork for...
The rise of the neo-Nazi movement in Europe is a clear indication of the attacks not only on Muslims as a minority, but they extend to cover other minorities as well.
I think that's right. I think the one group that does not seem to be protected by concerns about fairness, at least the group that I think of most immediately in terms of media coverage, are Muslims or Arabs. I think that caricatures are allowed, which would not be permitted for other groups and should not be permitted for any group. I think that there are other more subtle forms of violence. I feel that it is a violence against Muslims every time we talk about the Judeo-Christian tradition in the United States. That is a form of the violence of exclusion. And it assumes that there are not shared values along with Muslims and others who could be included in that. So I don't know. I think we need to look at that kind of violence as well. And I do believe that there is reason to be afraid in these societies, and that's where I think the obligation of people in the religious communities is to support each other from these kinds of manifestations of prejudice.
I'd like to make a point in conjunction with that. Recently, since the World Trade Center bombing, Jersey City has been nicknamed the Little Baghdad across the river. With what Brother Shacker had brought up earlier, Muslims, whether this is a secular society or Christian society, whichever, they overlap frequently. There is not a protection that is guaranteed. There's a constitutional protection for people, but there is also, this can be slanted and slid around, and I've seen it. If you're a minority and arrested, you have equal rights, but as white people used to say in the 60s, ours are a little more equal. And with the Muslim brothers that were arrested for the bombing, this is a perfect example. One of them accused of slugging an FBI agent. Well, 25 of them were surrounding him with MAC-10s. And since they broke into the house across the street from me to arrest, people and take boxes of things out of the house, I would really doubt that any brother would be stupid enough to slug an FBI agent who had a MAC-10 machine gun in his hands. So, but he's in prison with no chance of bail or anything else, which is denial of a constitutional right. He didn't do anything except supposedly obstruct justice, which means that he didn't talk to the guys. But he's, without bail for more than, he'll be in at least a year before the trial. This is a denial of a constitutional right by means of, and I sincerely believe, religious prejudice, persecution. So, this is a fear for Muslims. Having been through the 60s, having been through civil rights prejudice and all of the rest, battered women thing, I am not reassured by the existence of secular law or constitutional law or anything else that exists in the society. And I think this is a very real fear. For Muslims right now, what we see, not just in Iraq, but what we see here, I can tell you that walking down the streets in Jersey City and riding the subways is not one of the more comfortable things that you do. I carry CS2 gas in case of attack, because you can't carry a weapon in Jersey City on your person. It's a very scary time. People look at you as though you're some sort of an American traitor. There's something wrong with you. I've had beer cans thrown at me in other places. This was during Persian Gulf. We've been spit on to the point where the brothers would not allow the sisters to go anywhere by themselves. I was escorted to my job and back. We live in a situation that could become very volatile. I personally believe if the Waco thing had been a black religious cult, as one of our imams said at our demonstration in Jersey